The deck chairs scraped across Andrew's flagstone patio as people shifted after dinner, and I was standing near the railing with a glass of Pinot Noir I had barely touched, watching the Cattaraugie River catch the last light through the willow branches, when Cecily appeared beside me. Not beside me exactly, close enough that I could hear her without her raising her voice. She looked out at the water, not at me, and said, "You've been trying to figure out what to say for most of the evening. I think I already know what it is." My glass went still in my hand, not because she had caught me, because she was right. Andrew was 10 feet behind us, laughing at something his brother-in-law had said, not looking this way at all. And I was standing there realizing that the most dangerous person in the world is not the one who confesses something. It is the one who sees it before you have said a word. My name is James Whitfield. I am 38 years old and I restore heritage buildings in Kingston, Ontario. I work with limestone, the pale, honey-colored stone the city is built from, quarried from the local ridges 200 years ago and stacked into courthouses and churches and old merchants' homes that are still standing because someone, somewhere along the line, keeps taking care of them. My job is to do that taking care. I clean the stone, repoint the mortar where it has crumbled, stabilize the cracks before water gets inside and splits the whole thing apart from within. The work taught me something I carry whether I mean to or not. You do not repair what you cannot see. You have to read the surface first, understand what the damage is telling you before you touch anything. The worst thing you can do to an old limestone building is cover the problem with something new and call it fixed. I live alone now in a 2-story brick semi-detached on Berry Street, a short walk from the water. Heather and I split up 19 months before the dinner on Andrew's patio, no children. 3 years of marriage that did not end with an argument, not really. It ended the way a lot of things end in a marriage, gradually, then all at once, and with a silence so complete that the paperwork almost came as a relief. Heather wanted something fast than Kingston could offer her. She had taken a director role at a consulting firm in Toronto, and it suited her perfectly. She was good at large rooms, strong opinions, quarterly targets. She was not particularly interested in a husband who came home with limestone dust on his forearms and wanted to sit on the back porch and not talk for an hour. I did not blame her. I still don't. We packed 4 years of shared life into 11 boxes on a Saturday in March, and she drove west on the 401. And I stood in the empty living room and realized I could hear the house settling around me. Andrew had been my business partner since we were both 30. We had started Whitfield and Bauer Heritage Restoration out of a shared office above a hardware store on Princess Street with 2 employees and a used boom truck. By the time of the dinner on the patio, we had 11 staff, a project pipeline that kept us booked 14 months out, and contracts on buildings that had been standing since before Confederation. Andrew was the one who brought the clients in. He was good at boardrooms, at presentations to heritage conservation committees, at flying to Ottawa or Montreal for bid meetings and coming back with signed contracts. He was away 10 or 12 days a month easy. He had married me 4 years before that dinner. I was his best man. I stood at the front of St. George's Cathedral in the morning light coming through those old limestone walls I had actually helped repoint the year before, and watched her walk down the aisle, and felt something I pushed away before I could even name it. Buried it so fast I genuinely forgot where I had put it, or told myself I had. After Heather left, my life found a quiet shape. I was on work sites by 7, home by 5:30, cooked something simple, took a walk along the waterfront. Andrew and Cecily's house was 2 blocks from mine in the Sydenham neighborhood. When he was away, which was often, Cecily had a habit of stopping by my block in the evenings, sometimes with some ordinary reason attached, sometimes with no reason at all. She had cooked too much of a lentil soup. She was walking that way anyway. She needed to borrow a pipe wrench because something in their house needed fixing, and Andrew would not be back until Thursday. I accepted every excuse she offered because they were good excuses, and also because I was lonely in the specific, muted way that men in their late 30s are lonely after a divorce. Not dramatically, not loudly, just persistently, like a low-pressure system that never quite moves through. She was a ceramics artist. She worked out of a studio at the back of their property, a converted workshop that Andrew had renovated for her 3 years earlier. She made stoneware. Functional things mostly, bowls, mugs, small plates, but each piece had something in it that was difficult to describe without sounding ridiculous. They looked unfinished, but they were not unfinished. They looked imperfect, but the imperfection was deliberate. chosen. She told me once that there is a Japanese concept for it, for finding beauty in what is cracked or incomplete, for letting the repair be visible rather than hiding it under a perfect glaze. I thought about that for a long time afterward, in the way you think about something that has touched a nerve you did not know you had. She began leaving a thermos of tea on the scaffolding at whatever job site I happened to be working. The first time I thought it was a coincidence. She had been passing by, thought of it on impulse. Then it happened again at a different site across town. Black tea always. No milk, no sugar. A plain steel thermos with a small dent in the side from where she had once dropped it on a concrete floor. She never mentioned it. I never mentioned it. I would unlock the site gate at 7 in the morning and find it there on the platform beside my toolbox, still warm from being filled an hour before. I started to notice the days it was not there. She asked about my work in a way no one had in years. Not the surface version, not, "Oh, that must be interesting, working on old buildings." She asked specific things. What limestone from the Elgin quarries looked like compared to the Queenston, and why the match mattered for a heritage repair. Whether you could tell from the mortar joints what decade a previous contractor had worked on a wall. Whether I ever found things sealed inside the walls, letters, objects, layers of paint from rooms that had been different colors in different eras. I told her about a building near the waterfront where we had found a child's boot inside a wall cavity, sealed there probably in the 1880s, an old practice apparently, a charm against bad luck. I had held the boot in my gloved hands for a long moment before setting it aside. She listened to that with the kind of attention that makes you say, more than you planned. I told myself it was friendship. I believed it because I needed to. Because believing it was the only thing that let me keep the door open without having to admit, even to myself, why I wanted the door open in the first place. And I did want it open. That was the part I could not say out loud. Andrew was not a bad man. He was not cold or careless. He was simply absent, not just physically, though he was physically absent a great deal, but absent in the way that certain people are absent, even when they are sitting across from you at dinner. He had decided some years back that he had Cecily figured out, and so he had stopped looking at her closely. He told her she was talented and meant it, I think, but he said it the way you say something you have already decided is true and no longer need to examine. He had filed her away under known, and Cecily, I came to understand slowly, had never been something you could simply file. One November evening, Andrew in Quebec City for a project bid, the temperature already well below zero, that particular Kingston cold that comes off the lake and finds every gap in your jacket. She knocked on my door. She was fine, she said. She was just tired of the house being so quiet. I made tea. She sat at my kitchen table, and after a long time she said quietly and without drama that she had been thinking about what it meant to be known by someone versus being categorized by them. She did not say Andrew's name. She did not have to. I refilled her mug. Then I said that I understood the difference. She looked at me in a way that was direct and a little unsettling, not predatory, not performed, just honest. The look of someone deciding whether to say the true thing. She said, "I know you do. That's why I'm telling you." I looked down at the table. I always look down at the table. The signs were there, as visible in retrospect as mortar damage you have walked past 50 times and then one morning stop and suddenly see clearly. She knew I drank my tea without anything in it. She had noticed without being told that I worked best in silence in the early part of the day. She had read 3 books from the small shelf by my front door and brought each one back with a single sentence, not a review, just something she was still thinking about. She did not fill silences. She sat inside them alongside you, which is a different thing entirely and a harder thing to find. I told myself it was just how she was, that I was reading meaning into ordinary warmth because I was lonely and she was easy to be near. And the part of me that read limestone for a living, the part that had learned that what looks like a surface stain is often water damage all the way through the wall, knew I was not reading meaning into it. I was refusing to read what was already there. Heather arrived in Kingston on a Tuesday in February unannounced. She called from the parking lot of a cafe on Ontario Street to say she was in town. I went because I am not good at leaving people stranded in parking lots in February. She had left the firm in Toronto. She was rethinking everything and had convinced herself, in the way that lonely people sometimes do, that what she had rethought her way back to was us. I told her no, plainly without any heat, leaving no room to negotiate. There was no us to return to. She did not leave Kingston that week. She stayed at a bed and breakfast on King Street and began appearing in the places I frequented: the hardware shop on Brock, the cafe where I read on Saturday mornings, the worksite on Brock Street where we were repointing a 4-story limestone commercial block from the 1870s. I did not think much of it at first. I thought she would go home. The morning that changed everything was a Thursday in late February, clear and cold, the kind of Kingston winter day where the light is flat and sharp off the snow. Cecily came by the Brock Street site around 10. She sometimes stopped by when she was heading to a clay supplier on Division, set the thermos on the scaffolding and stayed 15 or 20 minutes, watching us work, asking questions. She was standing on the sidewalk below the platform in a wool coat the color of old fieldstone, looking up at a section of the cornice we had been working on. I was on the platform above, and we were talking about whether a repair done in the 80s with the wrong mortar mix had actually accelerated the spalling around it. I did not see Heather until she was already there. She came around the corner from the parking lot, saw me on the scaffold, and then saw Cecily below. She stopped. She was still for a few seconds. I know now what she was reading. Nothing wrong. Nothing that could have been photographed and called evidence. Just a man leaning over a scaffold railing, talking to a woman below, with an ease between them that takes time to build and does not announce itself, but is completely unmistakable to someone who knows how to look for it. Heather turned around and left without coming onto the site. She called Andrew that evening. The next morning Andrew called me. He was still in Quebec City but was cutting the trip short. His voice had a quality I had not heard in 11 years of partnership, not angry, but with all the warmth removed, calibrated, stripped back to the load-bearing structure underneath. He said, "Has Cecily been spending a lot of time around your sites?" I told him the truth. She stopped by occasionally when she was in the area. We talked while I worked. Nothing had ever crossed a line. There was a silence that communicated more than any sentence. Then he said, "Heather told me you look at Cecily in a way that she recognized," her exact words. I did not answer right away. He said, "Do you?" I said, "I have never said a word to Cecily I wouldn't say in front of you. I have never touched her." He said, "That isn't what I asked." He came back to Kingston the next day. He arrived at the Brock Street site on a Friday afternoon. When we were cleaning up for the weekend, walked through the gate, came up the scaffold stairs, and stood there with the whole city below us and the restored limestone facade 3 feet to his left. 150 years of repair visible if you knew how to look, the original stone beneath all of it still solid and true. He said, "I need to know if my wife has feelings for you." I said, "Andrew, I have never touched her. I have never said." He said, "I know, you told me. I'm asking something different." I looked at him for a long time. Then I said, "I see her. I know that's not what you're asking, but I'm telling you, I see her in a way I never asked for and cannot explain and have been trying to walk away from for longer than you want to know." He looked at me for a moment. Then he said, "I think you should find another partner for the business." He walked back down the scaffold stairs. I stood on the platform with the cold coming up off the street below and the limestone at my left and the sky going gray toward the lake, and I did not move for a long time. 11 years, the office above the hardware store on Princess Street, the boom truck, the first Heritage Trust contract, every project since, built from nothing and dissolved right there in the time it takes to go down a staircase. I did not fight it. I did not call. I worked alone on the Brock Street project with the rest of the crew for 6 weeks. 6 weeks of scaffolding and limestone and masonry tools in the cold, and I thought, over and over, about what I should have done differently, and arrived every time at the same answer. Feelings do not come with a choice about whether to have them. They come and then you decide what you do. I had not done anything, but doing nothing had still cost me everything. Cecily called once during those 6 weeks. I let it go to voicemail and listened to it 4 times. She said, "I think you paid a price you shouldn't have had to pay alone. I'm sorry, I don't know what else to say." I did not call back, not because I was angry at her, because every word I could have said was a confession I was not ready to make. Andrew called on a Sunday morning in April, when the snow was finally gone from the limestone on my block, and the crows were back in the maple out front. His voice was different from the version on the scaffold. Something rawer than either the old warmth or the controlled coldness. He said Cecily had told him she wanted to separate. He said she had been clear that it was not because of me. She had told him it was because she had spent 4 years feeling like a thing he was proud of, rather than a person he was curious about. And she had said, his voice caught here just slightly, that 30 minutes of conversation on a work site had made her feel more present in her own life than most of their evenings at home. I stood in my kitchen with my hand flat on the counter and said nothing. He said, I'm not telling you this to give you permission for anything. I'm telling you because I've been sitting with it for 3 weeks, and I keep arriving at the same place. I looked at her like I had already figured her out. A long time ago I decided I knew her, and I stopped looking. A pause. I was wrong to say what I said on the scaffold. That wasn't a fair thing to do. I said, let it sit for now. He said, all right. Cecily came to the Brock Street site on a Thursday morning in May, the project nearly finished, the limestone facade clean and solid in the spring light. She was not carrying anything. No thermos, no excuse, no reason attached. She stood on the sidewalk below the scaffold and looked up at the face of the building. Then she looked at me. She said, I didn't come for the scaffolding. I climbed down. We stood on the sidewalk together. She said, I owe you the truth. I have been coming around your sites for 2 years because being near you is the only time I feel like someone is paying attention to what I'm actually saying. That is the honest reason. It took me a long time to say it out loud, even to myself. I said, I know. She said, since when? I said, since you told me about the Japanese word for broken things. I knew then and I chose not to. She looked at the building for a moment. Then, what are you going to do about it? I told her I needed time. Not because I did not want this, I was done pretending otherwise, but because Andrew was still my partner, or had been, and because I needed to be sure I was choosing something real and not just filling the space that Heather's absence had carved out. I needed to know the difference between loneliness reaching for the nearest warm thing and actually wanting this specific person for every specific reason. She nodded. She did not ask me to explain further, or to hurry, or to give her a timeline. That single thing, the not asking, was itself the answer to the question I had been quietly asking about her for 2 years. She reached into her coat pocket and set the thermos on the scaffolding beside me. Then she walked back up the block without looking back. I looked at the thermos on the platform, the dented side facing out, still warm. I called Andrew that evening. He picked up. I said, I'm not going to pretend this isn't happening, but I'm not going to rush it either. He was quiet for a long time. Then, the Frontenac restoration bid comes up in October. I think we should put it in together. I said, give me the summer. He said, all right. What followed was not a love story in the way people usually mean. It was 2 people moving very carefully through a situation that had cost people around them a great deal, and trying to do it with enough honesty that the cost meant something. Cecily rented a flat on Johnson Street and kept her studio in the backyard arrangement while things settled. I saw her twice a week, then 3 times, then most days, but we moved slowly on purpose. The way you move through a heritage building you are still learning the structure of, feeling for the load-bearing walls before you decide what can shift. Andrew and I filed the Frontenac bid together in October and won it in November. We have not talked directly about Cecily and me. We have talked around it, in the way that people who have known each other 11 years can navigate a thing without naming it and still understand each other. He mentioned once that he was seeing someone in Ottawa, someone he had met at a heritage conservation conference. He said she argued with him constantly about methodology and found errors in his site assessments and told him so plainly to his face. He said he found it exhausting and also, and here he paused, the first time in years he had felt like someone was genuinely paying attention to him. I told him I understood completely. One morning last spring I unlocked the beat to the Frontenac site at 7. A massive limestone structure, mid-19th century, the most significant project we had ever taken on, and found the thermos on the scaffolding, dented side out, already warm. I had not told Cecily which site I was starting on that morning. I held it in both hands for a moment in the early light, the steam barely visible from the lid, the limestone behind me still cold from the night before. I thought about all the things that do not announce themselves, about how the most important structures in a life do not arrive with fanfare. They go up stone by stone in the cold, over a long time, and you only understand what you are building when you step back far enough to read the whole wall. That evening I sat across from Cicely at my kitchen table, and she asked what I had been thinking about all day. I told her, all of it. The thermos and the limestone and Andrew and the 11 years and the distance between doing nothing and feeling nothing, and the time I had spent standing in the middle of that distance, not knowing which way I was going to fall. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she set her mug down and looked at me and said, "That night on Andrew's patio, when I said I knew what you were thinking." She paused. "I was thinking it first. I just turned it into something else because I was afraid of what it would mean if I said it straight." I put my hand on the table. She put her hand next to mine. There are things that cost you something real. A business partnership strained past what you thought it could hold. A friendship renegotiated slowly from the foundation up, months of silence, and the uncomfortable work of being honest with yourself about your own motives. Those costs do not disappear because the ending is good. They are part of the ending. They are part of what it means to have taken something seriously enough to pay for it. What I know now is this: you do not get to choose when something becomes true for you. You only get to choose how honest you are about it when it does. I was not as honest as I should have been, for longer than I should have been, but I was honest eventually. A thermos of tea on a scaffold, an unremarkable object, functional and dented, offering nothing except warmth, and the fact that someone thought of you before you thought of yourself. In a life where people mostly hand you complicated things and wait for you to respond correctly, the person who quietly leaves something warm for you and asks for nothing in return, that person is harder to find than you think. I understand that now. Every morning I understand it again.